Congresswoman Maloney, Assemblyman Kavanaugh, and our new colleague, State Senator Brad Hoylman, for all of their great work standing with us every day. So I'm tasked at this point in the program with an update on the Sandy-related issues on the property. Now, anyone who watched the East River coasting up 14th Street or 20th Street or 23rd Street on the night of the storm knew that it was going to be extremely destructive. It was immediately apparent that anyone who had left their cars on the street was in trouble. And I watched as cars on 23rd Street were entirely submerged by water. The same was true on both 20th and 14th Streets. If you didn't see it yourself, the videos are plenty on the internet. You should take a look. It's extraordinary. And then we all experienced the electricity going out after the terrifying explosion at the 13th Street Power Substation, which knocked out power to all of our 110 buildings, as well as buildings south of 39th Street in Manhattan. And the East River did some serious damage. It overwhelmed most of our garages. It totaled cars that had been left inside, filling building basements with up to 9 feet of water, destroying the management office, and flooding NTT storage units. The Manhattan Kids Club 2 daycare on 14th Street was flooded and closed for a month. As one of our neighbors said to me, the water was so high and so deeply penetrated the property that there definitely were fish in Stuyvesant town that night. Washing machines in 15 buildings were destroyed. Some have suggested to me that was the one good thing to come from the storm. And the destruction in the basements created the need for a comprehensive remediation plan. Key cards rendered non-functional. Tishman Speyer's fancy and custom-made heat sensors were knocked out in many buildings, making them inoperable and causing many apartments to be overheated. Many of those sensors are still out, with some apartments too cold and many, many more far too hot. And many of you heard about the incident on the night of November 2nd, when Con Edison turned the power back on to some of the hardest hit buildings in our community at a time when Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village management were not prepared to receive it. Luckily, nobody was injured when the power was turned back, but it was a frightening experience for those who lived at 6 Peter Cooper Road, which had a small fire in the basement. Many of us stood outside that building that night at midnight as manhole covers were exploding along Avenue C, and the fire department was preparing to evacuate Peter Cooper and Stuyvesant Town buildings if carbon monoxide had become a concern. Remember, unlike many other parts of the city, our neighbors were not encouraged to evacuate in advance. In fact, we were all told, as Zone B, to shelter in place. I should note that the city and FEMA are reevaluating those lines, as well as the bigger picture issues on how we can protect ourselves in the future from similar events. And there is at least a possibility that some or all of Peter Cooper and Stuyvesant Town may end up in Zone A. But as a Zone B community without power or heat, we had many seniors who were trapped inside their apartments with no ability to walk down the stairs to get out. Even those who might have been able to walk down the stairs were trapped in their apartments because the lack of light in the stairwells made it too treacherous for them to try to navigate. So we asked CW Capital for a space to set up a council office and a volunteer area in the community center, and in partnership with the Tenants Association and our colleagues in government, we quickly organized a volunteer operation. We commenced a door-knocking campaign to check in on our neighbors. We were able to knock on each door in the property every day starting on Thursday of that week until nearly all of the power was back. That was more than 30,000 door knocks. We secured food, blankets, batteries. We also oversaw a team of nurses and doctors who checked in on the well-being of our neighbors. We even sent people out to pick up prescriptions where they were most urgently needed. There was a very high level of collaboration between the tenants and CW Capital during the storm. CW gave us space. They even agreed at that time to prepare daily property-wide updates that we agreed to distribute as we checked in on our neighbors. Everyone felt that we should put aside any differences that might exist and make sure that we got good and accurate information out there in the middle of an emergency. And without telephones or internet, those updates were really key for many residents. With building-by-building information, residents were able to plan and had a clear understanding of what hurdles management had to overcome. Unfortunately, that collaboration ended almost as soon as the storm was over. Since the storm, we have all grown increasingly frustrated by the lack of communication by CW Capital. We all know that their task is extremely difficult. We know that the property suffered serious damage. They deserve a chance to perform, and that's why we have all been extremely patient with them. But now, 3 months later, we have had to pull teeth to get them to give community updates. We have seen them slip unenforceable releases into their Sandy rent credits. We have heard them in the same breath say that people will not have laundry machines for almost a year, but that they will get no more abatements. So that patience has come to an end. You should know that they were invited to this meeting, but did not give the courtesy of a response. Then on Thursday, less than 48 hours before this meeting was to take place, perfectly timed, CW Capital put out their first update in more than a month and a half. And this came only after weeks of our asking them for information through letters, calls, emails. It makes me think, Mr. President, John Marsh, that we should probably schedule a tenants meeting every couple of weeks so that we can get more attention from our management company. In short, the update said the following. As to heat, it said that the automatic heat sensors were severely damaged and that they are currently opening and closing heating valves manually. That is why so many of us have been getting too much heat, where usually the opposite is the problem. Their repairs are about 60% done, and they said the automated system would be back by mid-February. Elevators that are presently out at 7 and 8 Peter Cooper Road and 440 East 23rd Street will also be back in mid-February, they say. However, management has ignored our request to cease tying up elevators in buildings that only have one elevator with non-emergency apartment renovations, an act which is simply unfair to the people who live in those buildings. They reported that buildings with intercom and keycard problems are going to have their systems replaced, and those systems will be operational in 8 to 10 weeks from now. You can assume early April for that. They further said that if you were in one of those buildings, live in one of those buildings, you have a guest who's coming to visit. Sorry, the guards in the lobby are not going to let them in. This basic service that you are paying for with your rent will not be available to you. You need to come down into the lobby to give them access, says CW Capital. Basements that are closed will remain closed until September, and management says that buildings without laundry machines should expect to continue without them until September. They suggest that you go to 2 Peter Cooper Road, and I understand that 2 Peter Cooper Road residents have a mixed view on having 15 other buildings coming to join them. They gave no update on trunks, no update on their remediation efforts, and no update on residents' many health and environmental concerns, despite our request for public updates on all of those matters. And most tellingly, they said that, quote, no other abatements are being provided. And to be clear, that is the part that is the most problematic of all. They say that even though you do not have 2 working elevators, you have no washing machine, your playground is mysteriously closed for 2 months, and you have to go to the lobby to greet your guests without being able to buzz them in with an intercom, that you should simply be understanding and that you should continue to pay your full rent. Okay, that may be their desire, but it may not altogether be their choice. Residents have now been without basic services for a long time, and some will be without a laundry room, for example, for almost a year. The Tenants Association can and will file a rent reduction claim before HCR for a diminution of services under the rent stabilization law. This is fair, it is reasonable, and it is a totally appropriate thing to do under the circumstances. So I say to the CW Capital representative, who we know is here listening to us today, the residents of this community simply have no choice at this point but to pursue administrative remedies against you. And 2 further notes. First, you better not try to charge recovery expenses as MCIs. And we know that you are thinking about it. We will fight that with every tool that we have. Second, we should talk about the abatements. that were granted in the immediate aftermath of the storm and the supposed release that was included in rent bills. Now, you all probably remember, as I do, the great fanfare with which those abatements were announced. On behalf of CW Capital, Managing Director Andrew MacArthur announced the abatements on November 6, saying, quote, "As a demonstration of our commitment and in appreciation for all that you have been through since last Monday night, I am announcing that anyone who's been without heat, elevator service, or electricity will not be charged rent for any day in which they were without one or more of those services," end quote. But they didn't just give you a credit, did they? No. They included in the bills a general release saying that if you accepted their reduced rent, that would mean that you are releasing them from all claims that you might have against them related to the hurricane forever, whether you anticipate them or not. Now, my strong view here is that these releases are not enforceable. Our research shows that under New York law, to be a valid release, you need to actually sign something and recognize what you are giving up. Nobody here is signing anything. The releases are vague, they are over-inclusive, and in my mind, it is very likely that residents may have just simply missed them in their rent bill and paid the reduced amount. So let me conclude on the issue of environmental and health concerns. In the absence of communication by management, I asked the city's Department of Health and Housing to inspect our buildings on a daily basis looking for mold, and have directed them to the buildings where residents have made specific complaints to my office. So if you have a specific concern, I encourage you to call me so that we can get their attention on that. I have been down into many of the basements myself with city representatives and the Tenants Association to inspect them, and the city continues to be supportive of the remediation plans that CW Capital has put into place. But we have asked management to update everyone on what steps they have taken, what they are finding, what they've done to protect the health of residents and workers, and they have not done so. See, the not knowing is the scariest part here. While we have the city monitoring the property every day, we all deserve for management to take these concerns seriously and show respect for the people who are asking the questions by actually answering them and making sure that we all understand why we are safe. Now, we're glad to be joined today by Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Health, Daniel Cass. We thank him, we thank the Commissioner of the Department of Health, we also thank the Mayor for being responsive to our needs. He is going to be here, Deputy Commissioner Cass, to take any questions that people have during the question and answer period, and I encourage you to pose any questions you have to him. This storm recovery is going to be an extensive process, and we hope for better communication and cooperation from CW going forward, and we will certainly fight to make sure that they are doing right by the residents of this community. So with that, thank you.